The October 21st, 2022 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer. Mr. Alcoffer is present. Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines is present. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley is present. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess is present. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Delahanty. Mr. Delahanty is present. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman is present. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio is present. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier is present. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman is present. Mr. Hebert. Mr. Hebert is present. Ms. Hughes Smith. Ms. Hughes Smith is present. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns is present. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller is present. President Lamar.
Here.
President Lamar is present. Mr. Long. Mr. Long is present. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe is present. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne is present. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris is present. Ms. Roman. Ms. Roman is present. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Taylor. Ms. Taylor is present. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons is present. Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio is present. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson is present.
Please stay seated. I would like to introduce Bishop Jeffrey L. Melvin of the Powerhouse Kingdom Cathedral Church of God in Christ, who has been invited to lead us in a moment of prayer.
Thank you. Would you please bow your heads with me as we pray? Father, we thank you and we bless you for your goodness and mercies and grace. Thank you, Lord, for traveling mercies and arriving grace. You allowed us to get here without flat tires, engine problems, or car wrecks, and we thank you for that. Now, Lord, we're here to do the people's bidding. Give us clarity of mind and of thought and of unity. And at the end of this day, we pray that the people will be blessed because of the things that are said and done in this session. And for this, we give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Bishop Melvin?
Yes.
I'd like to present you with this certificate of recognition. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by our newest legislator, Kirk Morris. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I call this special meeting of the legislature pursuant to the authority vested in me as president of the Monroe County Legislature by section C2-9C1 of the county charter and section 545-5 of the rules of the legislature of the county of Monroe. I want to thank the legislators for making themselves available to me on this very important step in our redistricting process. The clerk will read the full title of each motion to avoid any confusion as to which item is before the legislature. We will now hold the public forum. We have several people signed up to address the legislature. Mr. Clerk?
If you require assistance, a deputy is available to assist you in approaching the lectern. I will call 3 people forward at one time. Each speaker will have 2 minutes in which to address the legislature, and kindly conclude your remarks when the timer sounds, and then exit through the door right over to my right. Because of our ongoing renovations in the legislature clerk's office, we had some issues with our phones this week. So we just want to make sure that people didn't get missed if they called to sign up to speak. So we will give an opportunity to anyone that wishes to address the legislature that didn't sign up to speak beforehand. It's not something we normally do at full legislature, but because of the renovations, we will make sure everyone has a chance to speak before the meeting tonight. And thank you for your cooperation. Our first 3 speakers are Terrence Schnurr, Bishop Jeffrey Melvin, and Robin Wilt.
Madam President, legislators, those of us who have reached a certain age know that when an era comes to an end, we tend to think back about our experiences over the course of that era. So I'd like to reflect on things that have happened over the course of an era, a historic era that is coming to an end. Sadly, it's not the era of Monroe County legislative redistricting, which has dragged on for 13 months and seems likely to drag on well into next year and into the courts. It is the era of Liz Truss. Those of you who remember your history will remember it began on September 6, 2022, when the then Foreign Secretary traveled to Scotland and met with Queen Elizabeth II and was appointed Prime Minister. A few hours later, at a podium in front of number 10 Downing Street, she gave her first comments as the Prime Minister. About an hour later, and 3,500 miles to the west-southwest, I spoke at another podium, this podium, positioned in front of the Minority Leader's desk and directed at where the county executive is now sitting. I then told the County Legislative Redistricting Commission that this proposal is going nowhere and should go nowhere. Shortly thereafter, in one of the many breaches of regular order that this chamber has seen in the past 3 years, one legislator who was not a member of the commission was allowed to speak at length. And in that presentation, she tied herself tightly to the proposal that this legislature is scheduled to consider tonight. And over the entirety of the Liz Truss era, she has tied herself tighter and tighter to that proposal, calling anyone who dares to question it racist, Jim Crow, Mr. Alabama, and what have you. So imagine my surprise today when that legislator tweeted that there are valid concerns about this plan and it's not going anywhere. Welcome to the party. Sadly, the bridges you have burned cannot be unburnt. I hope it means that you will vote no on this proposal, because it is important to remember that this proposal isn't about 5 or 6 districts, it's about 29. And many of those other 23 or 24 districts violate New York State municipal home rule law and the county charter with respect to compactness and being drawn specifically to benefit a political party. I urge you to all look closely at the 11th district in the current map that's being replaced by the 18th district in the proposed map. It has a fist coming into it out of the village of Fairport, so it is clearly not as compact as possible.
Please summarize.
I shall. And what it is the district which a Republican legislator won by the narrowest of margins in the last election. If you look at the 2018 election, it's a shift of nearly 400 votes between then Governor Cuomo, and County Executive Molinari. Thank you for your time, and please vote no tonight.
Good evening. So now we have an 11th hour map from County Executive Adam Bello and the Democratic Caucus, and it proves exactly what supporters of the Crescent map have been saying all along, that the Monroe County Democratic Caucus is adamantly opposed to majority Black districts. The map the Democrats have proposed has only 2 majority Black districts. I needn't point out that 2 is significantly fewer than 5. Mind you, all the nonsense that certain Democratic legislators have claimed about the Crescent map not having 5 majority districts that are Black now has been verified as false by the county executive's own data analysis. How the Democratic caucus has conducted itself during the redistricting negotiations will not be forgotten. After months of stonewalling and negotiating in bad faith, then gaslighting the public, then spending taxpayer dollars on an expert that harmed the Black electorate in Michigan, you have at the last minute produced a map that preserves a status quo of existing racially gerrymandered districts that serve to uphold white supremacy. Supposedly, you now oppose the Crescent map because it will not withstand scrutiny under the 14th Amendment or the New York State Voting Rights Act. What I will tell you is that after your documented intent to suppress the Black vote in Monroe County, you should be more concerned about the members of the Black community, such as myself, filing claim against you to secure the 5 majority Black districts we deserve under the law. I urge you to vote on the right side of history this evening. There's still an opportunity for you to stand in solidarity with the community organizations that support the Crescent map, including the NAACP, the Urban League of Rochester, Baber AME, the Rochester Black Agenda Group, Surge Rochester, Rock Axe, Community Faith Leaders Roundtable, Memorial AME Zion, and Spiritus Christi Spark. Please support the Crescent map.
Madam President, Mr. Bello, legislators, again, my name is Bishop Jeffrey Melvin. I represent not only the Powerhouse Church of God in Christ, also the Pastors Roundtable. There will be those that will come after me that will talk much more specifically and poignantly about the map and all the gerrymandering that's going on. I want to talk to you about something else. It's called fuzzy math. Fuzzy math. Now, my grandparents on my mother's side come from North Carolina. On my dad's side, North Carolina, my mom's side, Alabama. After slavery, they would do a thing called sharecropping, and they couldn't count real well. And during the fall, they would bring all of their crops in, and Mr. John would say, Leroy, the way I see it, if you work another year, you would have been unpaid me for the seed that you owe me, but work another year. And what I'm trying to tell you all is that we are detecting a little fuzzy math here downtown in Rochester, New York. There's some fuzzy math going on. You want us to think that 5 districts is not better than 6 districts. But when the 6 districts are watered down, we'd rather have the 5 districts than the 6 districts because the 6 districts tie up the Black vote. And we want you to free the Black vote today. We're asking you to free Black vote. Something else happens during that time. Their children go to school and they come back and they say, Dad, next time you go to Mr. John, let me go with you because the children have learned how to read and write. And when they sit down, they go, Mr. John said, you're almost out of debt. And the son goes, oh no, Mr. John, we're way out of debt. In fact, you owe us $10,000. What I'm trying to tell y'all is we are learning how to read these politics in Monroe County. We're learning how to read. We're understanding what's going on with the Democrats and the Republicans and all that. And not only are we reading the politics, we're reading you. So if you decide to do this, it's going to last 10 years, but your term is going to come up before 10 years. And we're teaching our people that it's one man, one vote. Some of you just got in office, and we're looking for you to stand behind the Black community. Finally, I'm a churchman. I'm from Church of God in Christ. Out of the church that I pastor, at least 25 churches have come out of that church. Another 15 to 20 have come out of those churches. So I represent the people of Churchville, the ones that you stand behind the pulpit every year and say, I need y'all to vote for me. So when we vote for you, you come in these chambers and you give us, the bad business. I'm telling you now, it's time to free the Black vote. It's time to free the Black vote. We have learned how to read. We understand what's going on. We want, not only do we want the 5 districts, Mr. Bell, we want you not to veto the 5 districts if they pass on today. Thank you.
Our next 3 speakers are Mary Fornataro, Cynthia Anderson, and Nicholas Will.
Ready? Good evening. I'm Mary Fornataro. The other day, I put together a petition in support of the Crescent Map. Then I and 35 of my voting neighbors at my senior citizen apartment building in Henrietta, LD 13, all signed it. So we want Mr. Udelson and Mr. Bello to support the Crescent Map, and I would like the clerk to enter the petition into the record. So for anyone opposed to the Crescent Map, you're the reason the 67-year-old Voting Rights Act is still necessary. You don't get to choose your voters. The voters get to choose you. That's it.
Mr. President, to our legislators, to everyone that sit here today, I appreciate the fact that you give me an opportunity to stand before you for such a pertinent matter. I am Pastor Cynthia Renee Rumpf Anderson of the Greater Faith Hope Center. I sit on the Faith Leaders Roundtable. And I stand before you today with many pastors that are sitting here and that have not been able to make it, but we breathe one breath. And that breath fully says, we understand we have a controversy, but we are here for a solution. We are asking you to look over the redrawing of districts representing some portions of Rochester and make it right. I request one thing, County Executive Adam Bello, and that is for you to hear the hearts of those that are crying desperately for overdue justice in every area of our city. I am one about moments. We can't afford to miss the moment to emerge. We came today to seize the moment, to move forward in justice, and not to be held hostage to people's opinions. The city has faced one of the greatest assaults where we are being challenged in our voting rights while the powers that be backpedal. We won't tolerate injustice. We call for you to free the Black vote. Do not sit and allow the Black vote to be incarcerated and not support our rights. We are in this fight to win, and for no other reason but to win because it's our right. It's ethical and it's moral, and it is actually the proper thing to do. It's safe to say that we are justly due our 5 majority voting districts and not be imprisoned by the 6 majority minority districts. They want our Black vote diluted. And we say, no, ma'am. No, sir. No more. We want to increase our representation by creating these 5 Black majority voting districts. Again, it is within our legal rights to do so. Those that want to challenge and reject our rights, we call you to the table to answer these questions. Are you for justice and our rights? Or are you for injustice and what you deem is best for you and your party? Adam Bello, our great county executive. This is for the city of Rochester's best interest, in which you have an oath to safeguard. Therefore, you can't afford to reject the map and veto it and cause us an injustice with great harm. We came today to apply some moral pressure that you will reevaluate what is being, my husband, asked of you by the county's Democratic caucus. Please reject the very thought of veto. This veto would harm us taxpaying citizens and Black residents. We urge your approval of what best suits and benefits us Black people. We ask you to move into real time and give us what we deserve. We have already passed all the preconditions of the Jingles test. We have met the standards that qualify us to denounce his racist system that prevents increased voters' representation. This gives us full access and warrants a redrawing of the map. That includes 5 Black majority districts. Give us our increased voting power. Put it back in the hands of us that are entitled to it, called Black voters. Don't use the Latino community to hold us hostage to this racist system. Nope. We deserve nothing less than to be safeguarded, and I need you to hear me well, by our leaders that we elected and our leaders that we trust. We have one voice, and that is a cry saying, help enfranchise the Black vote. Thank you. Pastor Cynthia Renee Rumpf Anderson.
Good evening. I was going to try to recapitulate all the contradictory things that the Democratic caucus has said over the last 2 months or so, but there are simply too many. One member posted a series of comments on Facebook contrasting the crescent map with, quote, the map that I prefer, but that has not been allowed to be discussed. The map that I prefer, that's a map. But we couldn't see the map. It was an unpublished map. We had a map except when we didn't have a map. Today, we have a third of a map. The focus shifted from criticizing the shapes of districts, an odd criticism from someone from the town of Brighton, which is oddly shaped because the city of Rochester annexed its northwest corner about 100 years ago. A map, a justly drawn voting district map, can be oddly shaped. It could even be the shape of a crescent. But I want to focus on a pernicious claim that has been repeated and was reified in a press release by the Democratic committee, that the crescent map does not have 5 majority Black districts. You are being lied to. Only 2 of the districts in the crescent map are majority Black. That claim relies on the exclusion of Black Latinos from the ranks of Black voting age population. It also excluded multiracial voters who had checked Black on the census. As the father of 3 biracial children, one of whom successfully litigated a racial discrimination case against a school district, I want to point out that anyone who's Black enough to be subject to oppression should be considered Black enough to qualify for the remedies written into civil rights legislation. Is Monroe County really going to march into court saying that Black Latinos aren't Black? If so, I don't like your chances. Sorry, I'm just finishing up. I have here a petition that was created about a week ago that has about 400 signatures in favor of the crescent map. Please vote in its favor. And Executive Bello, please sign it. Thank you.
Our next 3 speakers are Demond Wilson, Reverend Benjamin Cox, and Reverend Myra Brown.
I'll be quick. Just wanted to say just 2 basic things. As a member of both the Raise and the Ruby committees, being tasked with looking at structural inequities in and around Rochester, I've noticed that some of the same issues that we deal today, we've dealt with for the last 50, 60 plus years. And it all seems like almost impossible to solve because we have the same systems. And before we can see true change and real change, we need to address our systems. And the best way for us to address our systems is to have representation in those systems. So for me, this Crescent map is a no-brainer. If we're so committed to addressing some of the racial inequities that we've proposed that we want to change through RAISE and through Ruby, we have an opportunity to do it right here and right now. So the point of why this is even a discussion, it just baffles my mind. The second thing I want to say is this, is that unfortunately, I've come to the realization that for some of y'all minds are already made up and you're committed to doing what you want to do. And this is my third time talking about this, coming up here, coming before you. So at this point, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. All right. At this point, I'm not going to allow this to go swept under the rug. I'm going to make sure that people in this county know who's voting for what and why they're voting for it. That is a commitment that I'm making today in front of everyone here, because this is not going to go unnoticed. I will make sure that this does not go unnoticed. So any vote, any veto will still be in this community and will be heard about for years to come. Thank you.
I'm simply going to be brief because this is quite unnecessary that we have to come to this point. As long as we have been struggling, just when we thought that we could ease our mind and the weight on our shoulders, it gets a little heavier, and not from without, but from within. It seems as though many of our Democrat legislators have completely ignored the value of the Black vote. By their own admission, they choose to suppress the Black vote in these 5 districts, where our voters have always turned out in large numbers. Statistical analysts found that these 5 districts have been effective Black districts in voting for candidates of our choice. And now you want to take that away. I ask you the question, who has hoodwinked you into believing and thinking that the Black vote has become irrelevant in these 5 districts? Or let me say it another way. How can you sit there and whitewash the Black vote that we fought so hard for, especially in these districts? You want to now create districts where Black votes will be outvoted by white voters? In other words, white voters will control the outcome of the Black districts. Free the Black vote.
I'm Reverend Myra Brown. You know, I lead a group in Rochester called SPARC, Spirit of Christi's Anti-Racism Coalition. We spent 17 years really working in Rochester community to dismantle systemic racism in order that we might have a more just and equitable city. As Blacks came up from the South, they encountered redlining, deed restrictions, discriminating housing and sale and rental practices, prejudiced block clubs and deed restrictions, and we had all kinds of real estate practices that were supported by banks in our municipality. And as a result, Blacks were pushed into either the 3rd or the 7th ward to live compactly and densely in impoverished areas with overcrowding, without improvement, while offering little support with a lack of proportionate political representation that could have changed these conditions. And so I'm here to add our collective voice to demand that in accordance to the law, that Adam Bello support the full and equal representation to the Black voting community through the proposed Crescent map led by President Sabrina Lamar. We support the map that creates 5 majority Black voting districts that are at least 50% Black that will enfranchise the collective Black community. Black voting rights are under attack all across the country, where Black voters are being opposed for what they are legally and constitutionally entitled to. We want to be enfranchised in Rochester with these proposed 5 Black majority voting districts. They are, according to the census and the fact that they passed the Gingrich standard test, legally entitled to have our own specific minority electoral district. This district is effectively called the Black Majority Voting District. It will give proportionality and freedom to choose our own candidate of choice without the pressure of coalition voting within a majority-minority district. So we're asking for you to free the Black vote. We support centering Black voices in this dilemma that has plagued our city. All across America, white voices are attempting to drown out Black voices that are speaking about our reality and their legal right and our legal right to enfranchisement. White voices that are not suffering from the disenfranchisement are coming to tell Black voters what we need by presenting to us experts to decide what we are entitled to, manipulating voting data, ignoring the census, suggesting something other than what Black voters are rightly entitled to. It's a violation of our civil rights. Muting the Black voice and centering white dominant cultural voices is a product of systemic racism, and we urge County Executive Bello to stop this practice. The Democratic Party is, up till now, has always been seen as an ally party to the Black voter and voters of color communities, protecting our constitutional rights. We urge you to return to that practice. We support the call of the collective Black community for Democrats to stop being obstructionists who abandon the Black voter. While we understand the reality of Black anxiety that can cause white voter fear and trigger historic animosity and division, even between people of color groups, we urge Adam Bello and the Democrats of opposition to resist your anxiety and enfranchise the collective Black community by your support of the 5 Black voting districts of the Crescent Map. Free the Black vote. We urge you to join your Republican colleagues in supporting and voting for Black collective enfranchisement within our city and county. This is a historic moment. Imagine being the only city in the U.S. where Republicans and Democrats come together to enfranchise Black voters. You're going to miss this moment. Free the Black vote. And finally, we urge you to stop confusing voters by saying 6 is better than 5. As our county executive Democratic opposition attempted to confuse voters by saying 6 is better than 5, we recognize that you're talking about 6 majority minority districts and not the 5 Black majority districts. We are asking for 5 Black majority districts to not be incarcerated in your 6 majority minority districts. We are asking to be liberated into our own voting district. And we urge you tonight to free the Black vote.
Our next speaker is Ruth Brooks Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. I return to reiterate what many have already said in support of the 5 majority Black districts in Monroe County, in the Monroe County Legislature. Majority means 50 plus 1. We have a map that provides 5 districts where Black people make 50 plus 1. The first time we have ever had a map propose this and is long overdue. This is the right thing to do. It is the legal thing to do under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. I hope after hearing the community speak, some of the legislators and the county executive who is proposed to this map have had a change of heart. Show us you have morals and respect for the Black community. For the Black community that has been the foundation for the success of the Democratic candidates. We will be watching this year, next year, and the foreseeable future. Pass the crescent map. Free the Black vote. Democrats, you are the Willie Lynch bastard descendants who were taught / brainwashed to pit the old against the young and the brown against the black. If you don't know your history, please go look it up. It's called the Willie Lynch syndrome, and you are suffering very badly from the Willie Lynch syndrome. So please, free the Black vote. Democrats, sign legislature for the 5 black districts. Adam Bellows, do not veto. Free the Black votes. No more Jim Crow. 5 black districts. Black votes matter. And if you don't know, you better ask somebody.
Is there anyone that didn't sign up to speak that wishes to address the legislature at this point? Yep, please come forward. Just state your name once you get up to the podium, please.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Gail Harrison, and I am the chair of the Baber Social Justice Commission. I am also co-chair of the Rock Act's Justice System Task Force. We are here today to say free the Black vote. We are here today to say pass the map that represents the crescent map and represents over 91,000 Black African-American citizens, residents, so that we have representation. That's only fair, it's only right, and that's what should be done. With us today are representatives from the Baber Social Justice Commission, where there are 5 of us here, and each of us represents suburban, urban communities, and we have a broad impact. And so I am asking you, Executive Bello, to represent us in your acceptance and recognition of the importance of 5 majority Black districts. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the legislature this evening? There being none, this concludes the public forum.
We will now proceed with the consideration of local laws. Will the clerk please read the first item on the agenda?
Item number 1, referral 22-0312.LL, providing that local law intro number 291 of 2022 entitled Amending Monroe County Charter and Administrative Code relating to legislative district boundaries in terms of members of county legislature be lifted from the table.
Move it. Second.
Moved by legislator Barnhart, seconded by legislator Brew and Delahanty. This is to lift from the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Roll call.
Roll call.
To lift from the table, Mr. Brew.
Yes.
Mr. Brew votes yes. Ms. Roman.
No.
Ms. Roman votes no. Mr. Alcoffer.
Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Ms. Barnhart.
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart votes yes. Mr. Baines.
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Mr. Blankley.
No.
Mr. Blankley votes no. Mr. Burgess.
No.
Mr. Burgess votes no. Mr. Colby.
Yes.
Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Delahanty.
Yes.
Mr. Delahanty votes yes. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman votes no. Mrs. DeFlorio.
Yes.
Mrs. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer? Yes. Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Frazier? No. Mr. Frazier votes no. Ms. Hasman?
No.
Ms. Hasman votes no. Mr. Heber?
Yes.
Mr. Heber votes yes. Ms. Hughes Smith?
No.
Ms. Hughes Smith votes no. Mr. Johns? Mr. Johns votes yes. Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Keller votes yes. Mr. Long?
No.
Mr. Long votes no. Mr. Mafucci?
No.
Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McCabe votes yes. Mr. Milne?
Yes.
Mr. Milne votes yes. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Morris votes yes. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor votes yes. Ms. Vasquez Simmons?
No.
Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Ms. Vecchio?
No.
Ms. Vecchio votes no. Mr. Udelson?
No.
Mr. Udelson votes no. President Lamar?
Yes.
President Lamar votes yes. Motion to lift from the table passes 16-13. Item number 2, referral number 22-0312.LL, providing that local law intro number 291 of 2022, entitled Amending Monroe County Charter and Administrative Code relating to legislative district boundaries and terms of members of county legislature be adopted.
Second. Second.
Moved by legislator Barnhart, seconded by legislator Brew and Delahanty. This is a motion to adopt. At this time, I am going to introduce Joe Burns, Board of Elections Attorney, to answer any questions and concerns regarding the map before you. All questions should be directed to Mr. Burns. Is there any discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. As the presiding officer said, my name is Joseph Burns. I have done work, represented the Board of Elections, and I was asked a few weeks ago by Commissioner Nicolai to look at the maps that had been proposed at that point in light of the requirements of the Voting Rights Act. If I could, just for a couple minutes, speak about the Voting Rights Act. And I know it's something that has come up a number of times already tonight. In order to comply with the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, the minority group in question must be sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a majority of the voting age population in a single-member legislative district for the body. Second requirement is the minority group in question must be politically cohesive. And finally, the majority must vote sufficiently as a block to allow it usually to defeat the preferred candidate of the minority group. If those preconditions are met, the courts then examine the totality of the circumstances in the political subdivision in question. That examination is guided in part by the Senate report from the 1982 Voting Rights Act amendments. I won't go into all those details. This is commonly called, again, something that's come up a number of times tonight already, the Jingles test. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court, in the case of Brnovich versus Democratic National Committee, reaffirmed that the validity of the Jingles framework. It's sometimes said that a good rule of thumb to use when working towards compliance with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is that where racially polarized voting exists, if a district with a majority of minority voting age population can be created, it must be created. Again, that's commonly referred to as, commonly considered a good rule of thumb to be used. I recently was given copies of the analysis of Professor Hanley and the memo of Professor Weiss. And if I could, just for a few moments.
Point of order, Madam President. Have Professor Hanley and what lawyer Weiss been invited to present tonight, or simply this attorney? Is this an appropriate presentation with a motion on the floor, Madam President?
I'm gonna let proceed.
Point of order, Madam President.
What's your point of order?
There's a motion on the floor for discussion by the legislators. There's nothing in the rules that provides for non-legislators to participate in that discussion, whether to present information for their side or against, or against. This is supposed to be time for discussion by the legislators and it's against the rules of the legislature.
I actually agree with you, Legislator Unison. Any questions?
Yes. Through the President, to Mr. Burns, can you continue, please, as to your discussion about whatever you were asked to evaluate?
Point of order, didn't the President just support my objection?
I'm going to uphold that point of order.
Okay.
So at this point, we would go on for discussion by legislators, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Legislator Hebert?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a few questions, probably to the attorney. So thank you for recognizing me. Number one, when it comes to redistricting, your experience, has anyone ever created a perfect map with zero opposition?
Well, I guess I'm not entirely. I guess I'm not entirely sure how to answer that, but I would say if what you're looking for is anybody to say definitively that Map A would undoubtedly pass any Voting Rights Act issues or would undoubtedly pass any 14th Amendment issues, I think it's impossible to say that. Those issues are certainly issues that could come up, that can and would come up in court should one map or another be challenged. I think there are certain things that a body might look at to make one map more likely to pass muster or not pass muster.
Thank you. Actually, I've taken a number of courses on redistricting since 2010 redistricting, and everybody who has ever talked about that has always told me there was always an objection of some sort, whether it be communities of interest, compactness, shape, et cetera. But thank you for your response. I'm not sure you got an opportunity to say this, but does the map that we are considering tonight meet the requirements of the Voting Rights Act?
I'm going to allow the question.
Yeah, I raised the same point. I objected, raised the point of order to this President's upheld that point of order, but yet colleagues continue to ask questions when the President's already ruled that this presentation is not in order.
Well, Legislator Unison, I did in my remarks say direct your questions to Mr. Burns. We were making him available. What I did uphold was him not continuing on with his speech. But if you have any questions, if any legislator has any questions, they should be directed towards Mr. Burns.
So you're not upholding my original point of order that the President...
I'm upholding your point of order of not letting him continue on with his speech. I am going to make him available or allow him to answer questions that legislators may have.
Will will legislators be able to introduce people to come up and also answer questions that we might want to?
No.
Why?
They're not on the, you didn't submit that prior to this meeting.
Well, because it would be in violation of the legislature rules. As this is.
Are you appealing the ruling of the chair?
I am.
Roll call vote.
Was there a second?
Yes.
I didn't hear.
I had Legislator Unison moving and Legislator Roman with a second. Yes sustains the rule of the chair. Mr. Brew.
Yes.
Mr. Brew votes yes. Ms. Roman.
No.
Ms. Roman votes no. Mr. Alkoffer.
Yes.
Mr. Alkoffer votes yes. Ms. Barnhart.
No.
Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baines.
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Mr. Blankley.
No.
Mr. Blankley votes no. Mr. Burgess.
No.
Mr. Burgess votes no. Mr. Colby.
Yes.
Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Delahaney.
Yes.
Mr. Delahaney votes yes. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman votes no. Mrs. DeFlorio.
Yes.
Ms. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer.
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier votes no. Ms. Hasman.
No.
Ms. Hasman votes no. Mr. Hebert.
Yes.
Mr. Hebert votes yes. Ms. Hughes Smith.
No.
Ms. Hughes Smith votes no. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns votes yes. Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Keller votes yes. Mr. Long.
No.
Mr. Keller votes no. Mr. Mafucci.
No.
Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McCabe votes yes. Mr. Milne.
Yes.
Mr. Milne votes yes. Mr. Morris.
Yes.
Mr. Morris votes yes. Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor votes yes. Ms. Vasquez Simmons.
No.
Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Ms. Vecchio.
No.
Ms. Vecchio votes no. Mr. Udelson.
No.
Mr. Udelson votes no. President Lamar.
Yes.
President Lamar votes yes. 15-14. Appeal of the rule is overruled.
And,
Rule of the chair is stayed.
and just for the record, Mr. Burns is a county employee, and anytime the department, somebody from a department has a question to that specific department, we always allow the legislators to ask questions of that person from that specific department. He's from the Board of Elections, and so we're gonna continue to allow questions to be asked of him.
Next, proceed, Madam President.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. In the spirit of Mr. Udelson's concerns, I'd like to redirect this question to the administration. And we'll go back to the attorney. Is that okay or not?
No, we want to make sure that we're directing questions to Mr. Burns.
Okay, thank you. We need to-
Some decorum, please.
If you could repeat that question from earlier?
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
It's really pretty simple. Does the proposed map we're considering tonight meet the requirements of the Voting Rights Act?
I think, as I said, it's impossible to say definitively that one map or another would pass muster with regard to the Voting Rights Act or the 14th Amendment or any of the other matters that a map would have to comply with. But I would say if you reviewed Professor Handley's analysis, I would note that she says multiple times, I believe, that racially polarized voting does exist in Monroe County, in Rochester. In spite of that, you have had candidates preferred by Black voters elected to districts that do not have a majority voting age population that is Black. But I guess I would say, certainly if you have racially polarized voting and you don't have districts that are majority Black voting age population, you certainly run a serious risk, I would think, of the Black population, the Black voting age population not able to elect its candidates, which of course I think would certainly open the door to a problem with the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Thank you. Through you, Madam President, to the attorney, does the proposed map meet the requirements of the redistricting changes that were signed into law in New York State? So the New York State changes were made in October of 2021.
When I looked at the map, I didn't specifically look for. I didn't specifically look at it in light of the recent changes to the municipal home rule law. And I would also note, I think thus far there's only been, I believe, one lawsuit filed anywhere in the state challenging a map as being in violation of those changes, and that I believe is in Onondaga County. So there's certainly not much case law or history or interpretation of it. I do think, I do recall, like I said, I didn't specifically look at it in light of the changes to the municipal home rule law, but certainly the one fairly objective standard, as I recall, the deviation, the 5% deviation. I will say, with regards to that, I do believe, I do recall all the maps that I looked at meeting at least that one.
Thank you. Is it your opinion, through Madam President, to the attorney, is it your opinion that the map is legal or will pass muster?
Again, I don't want to. It's impossible to say definitively. I mean, were to become law, and were there to be a challenge, whether it's under the Voting Rights Act or the 14th Amendment or the Municipal Home Rule Law, it's impossible to say definitively. But I would go back to again with regards to the Voting Rights Act. As I had said, a good rule of thumb is that where you can create districts to elect minority candidates, you have to. Would seem to me that if you do have racially polarized voting, that you would need, if you then created districts that had majority voting age population that is Black, would certainly make, you would think it would certainly make it far easier to achieve those goals than if you merely had districts that had, say, a plurality of Black voting age population.
Thank you.
Go ahead, legislator.
Burns, can you share, your being an expert witness today, would you share your expertise in terms of litigation that you have managed, led, in terms of the Voting Rights Act or compliance with the 14th Amendment?
I've not, while I have extensive experience from my time working at the State Board of Elections, representing boards of election, commissioners and boards of elections at the local level, and certainly doing a significant amount of election litigation. I've not actually I've not actually represented a candidate, or excuse me, I've not exactly represented a plaintiff in a 14th Amendment or a Voting Rights Act case.
So you have no courtroom experience, and you haven't briefed on a Voting Rights Act matter, you've never written briefs, you haven't participated on a team, you've worked in the Board of Elections environment, which is not the Voting Rights Act section of the law.
Madam President, a point of order.
What's your point of order?
My point of order is we should be here criticizing. He's been hired by the county. It's my statement here. He's been hired by the county commissioners of election, both parties, and he's here in that point of representing us. And so going through his qualifications is not a necessary item.
May I
Do we have a second?
May I address that issue, please, Madam President?
No, do we have a second?
Second. Sorry.
Roll call vote.
You have to make a ruling, Madam President.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Baines, I'm gonna uphold his point of order, so if you have any other questions, that's not that last one you asked, then you're more than welcome to
Let
proceed.
me ask this question of the attorney. You are here to give expert testimony, are you not?
I don't know how exactly it would be classified. That I believe that's more of a term of art in litigation than before a county legislative body.
Madam President, in fact, an expert witness must be qualified, and I was a judge for 10 years. I don't know how many courtrooms you've been in, but an expert witness has to demonstrate the basis of his or her expertise. You are here giving expert witness, and I've just been told that I may not ask you how you developed that expertise.
We're going right back to my point of order,
Which was
Madam President, and she ruled on it, so let's have a
Are you
vote, please.
appealing the point of order? The ruling?
Thank you, Madam President.
Is there any other discussion?
Madam President,
Go right ahead.
could you explain the significance of Cooper v. Harris to this situation?
Yeah, thank you. That is one of the cases that Mr. Weiss raised in his memo. That was a 2017 U.S. Supreme Court case where there were two districts in North Carolina that were found to be in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. A little history. After the 1990 census, there were two majority black districts in North Carolina. After the 2000 census, they were no longer majority black districts. However, they continued to elect candidates preferred by the black voters. After the 2010 census that they were made into majority black districts. There's another issue. There's another issue with regards to these districts that was their shape. One was said to look like a Rorschach test. And the other one averaged only a few miles wide at certain points. So there was that other issue as well, the shape. There were multiple decades of history with regards to those districts electing candidates that were preferred by black voters.
Mr. Weiss, isn't that exactly what this, Hadley's statistical analysis demonstrated? That there are 5 districts that have been electing black communities candidate of choice? Is the same conclusion?
Microphones to be turned up, either this legislator all offered, all right, you're being said it all.
That is, I would say that is similar. The one thing I would say that is different is you had with these two North Carolina districts in the Cooper case, I believe about 30 years of history. I think with the analysis of Professor Hadley, I think she only looked at 3 election cycles, primary and general. So I'm not sure if the analysis that she did was as deep as what was done with the Cooper case, where again, you had 30 years, including one decade, at least one decade where they did have a majority black population, followed by another decade where those districts did not. So I'm not entirely sure if it's apples to apples, if you will.
Certainly, as legal cases go, it has to be district by district analysis, is my understanding. Would you agree that Professor Weiss, who has over 40 years of experience working in districting, voting rights, and census law, that in his memo, his analysis of Dr. Hadley's statistical analysis, a statistical analysis that is accepted legally as the standard for analyzing Voting Rights Act, that his statement is that to take effective black districts where blacks are electing the candidate of their choice, and to put additional black voters into those 5 districts, removing them from a 6 dilutes the overall black voting power. Is that not the conclusion that Professor Weiss drew from that
The only thing I would say to that is I'm not sure that I've seen any proposal that would show.
Well, Mr. Burns, the question is very straightforward. Is that what you read? That's what I read Dr. Weiss's conclusion to be. That we risk violating the 14th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act by diluting the power of the black vote by removing black voters from LD 21 and putting them into the 5 districts that are already consistently and effectively electing the candidate of choice by black voters.
Again, I guess I'm not sure if you have that dilution or if it's as good of an argument.
My question is I'm saying, did you not read the same thing?
Can we just make sure that all questions and answers are through the president, please? Thank you.
My apologies. Yes, through you, Madam President. To Mr. Burns, I'm asking if you read the same statement that I read in Professor Weiss's report.
I don't have Professor Weiss's report up on my screen at the moment, but that may have been what he said.
Oh, it is what he said. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Madam President, on the issue of expertise, would you agree with the statement that Attorney Weiss is a highly credentialed expert in the
Point of order, we're here to discuss the map, not people's abilities or their level of expertise. We're here to discuss the map.
Do we have a second? So, on this point, or sustain this point of order?
So, Madam President, may I ask questions of this gentleman, his opinion?
As long as it's about the map.
It's about the map, okay. Would you say that Attorney Weiss, who gave his opinion about the map, is a highly qualified expert in the 14th Amendment and the VRA?
Point of order, we're back to where I was a minute ago. We're talking about different people's expertise, and let's talk about the map, or preferably call for a roll call vote.
I'm going to uphold your point of order, and we're going to go to a roll call vote.
President Lamar, it appears there's a lot of people who still have things to say.
Go ahead.
Madam President, through you, Madam President, to the contracted worker for Monroe County, right? If I'm correct. Can you provide us through your frame of reference what you believe packing to be?
I don't have an actual definition when it comes to packing. I know that I think in this context there's I think there's been an argument advanced that some of the districts with what's come to be called the Crescent Map are unnecessarily packed, impermissibly packed. I would note that I think that they are at a low point, 51% Black voting age population. I believe at a high point, 57% Black voting age population. I would note that that's certainly not, say, 70 or 80%. Certainly significantly less. I think the other thing to look at is, but for the voters placed into these districts, would additional districts be able to be created that would enable Black voters to elect candidates of their choice? I don't know. I don't think I've seen any proposals that would purport to elect 6, 7, 8 candidates preferred by Black voters. So I think that's where you certainly have that issue of packing, or you're more likely to have that issue of packing if that argument could be made that additional districts could have been made, could have been created.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you, Madam President, that is actually the question that I've been posing. We've been posing as a caucus for 2 months now. Is there a possibility to create another district that provides an opportunity for representation? Can you speak to LD 21 and your understanding of LD 21, its current makeup of minority composition?
I don't have the numbers in front of me as to what it currently is.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to comment on that.
Okay. My understanding is that the district is currently 43% white, and it's being moved to be 61% white in this proposal. It's turning and it's returning to be a majority white district for the first time in 2 decades. It's a district that, when you look at racially polarized voting, does and has shown an ability to support Black candidates. It sounds like a roll call vote is going to happen and occur. So I'm going to read my reasoning why I am choosing to reject this map. Dear colleagues, I request that you all reject the Crescent map, the illegally proposed map of which even the expert witness here has not said is all 100% legal before the legislature. The map reduces opportunities for Black and brown representation. And the surrounding rhetoric around this map threatens to undo the vital work we have all done. The process has been hijacked by leaders who are more interested in negotiating preferred districts than listening to the concerns of neighborhoods. We keep talking about how municipal home rule law doesn't count here, but I can tell you that many community organizations have spoken out regarding the breakup of neighborhoods in this proposal, and their voice has gone unheard. I'm asking that you listen to the individuals who live in the neighborhoods in question. Community members like myself who have opposed this map and have continually advocated for more majority-minority districts than what is proposed. This proposal overly packs Black voters into historically red-lined communities. Redlining was a form of systemic oppression, and looking to pack voters into those same lines on the basis of race is racial gerrymandering. Experts have weighed in, and they too see that Monroe County should have 6 majority-minority districts. This is because minorities have consistently represented the area covered in the proposed 5-district map. It's not just the 3 cycles that you have mentioned today, sir. It has happened for some districts over 30 years, meaning that they have in fact passed results tests, citing in the Voting Rights Act. They've already historically elected candidates of choice for Black voters, and overly packing Black voters into those districts can be seen as a violation of the 14th Amendment. I will continue to demand that we respect the law and advocate for more opportunities for diverse representation. We've heard individuals who support the map have said within the last few weeks that there needs to be revisions. Those are revisions because of the law. This type of packing has been ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. We should follow the law and do so while uplifting the Black vote. As a reminder, in the proposed map, LD 21 becomes a majority white district for the first time in 2 decades, reducing the number of Black and brown residents and increasing the number of white residents in the district from 43% to 61%. It becomes a less diverse than 2 blended districts, one of which I represent. We do not need another majority white district. And today, to my colleagues, your vote will affirm your desire to create less diversity in the seats that we are privileged to sit in. Again, for me, there is no desire to go backwards. We should not desire to be past. The lines drawn by banks to redline us will not be the same lines that lift us up. I'm going to repeat that just one more time. The lines drawn by banks to redline us cannot be the same lines that lift us up. I demand we allow Black voters opportunities to influence representation, even outside of those lines. And for that reason and many more, I will be voting no today. As mentioned and shown today, it sounds like you haven't seen a proposal, but as mentioned and shown today, there are different ways to achieve the same outcome, to uplift Black voters. And this map is deeply flawed in doing so. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to express why I will be voting in the negative for this particular illegal proposal. Thank you.
There's no more discussion.
President Omar?
Go right ahead, Legislator Barnhart.
Thank you so much. The Crescent map has never been about the lines. The community is supportive of this map because of what it represents. Black voting rights, self-determination, enfranchisement for a long neglected part of Rochester. The campaign for the Crescent map has been successful in so many ways. People are excited about voting rights. They're excited about voting. They learned about the Voting Rights Act, and people became engaged in the map. When does that ever happen? A lot of people in this body did not expect the public to be this interested in the map. That's a success. We also know it's been a success because of the constantly changing positions of the Democrats who oppose the map. The opposition to the Crescent map is about one thing: Black voters and their place in our democracy. This entire fight over this map is about Black voters. The county executive has always supported the first map that was produced, Arkbridge A, a map that kept things pretty much the same as they are now. 2 50% plus Black majority districts, 3 near Black majority districts. Arkbridge was never asked to consider minority voting rights. They adjusted the lines based on population and town boundaries. The administration had never budged from those lines until today. After a bipartisan group of legislators sat down together to draw a map and agreed to 5 Black majority districts, the Democratic caucus walked away after seeing the first draft. And the problem was the 5 districts. No one wanted to make them better. They just didn't believe in it. The Democratic caucus told the public, and we heard it again tonight, majority minority districts are what they want, not Black districts. Even if the minority communities don't vote together. Minority Leader Roman has said, and said again today, she's okay with limiting Black opportunity if it gives others a chance. And she falsely claimed that the Crescent map diluted Latino vote percentages. Latino voter percentages were never touched. It's the Black voter totals that were the issue. And in fact, the map proposed today by the administration lowers Latino percentages in one of the Northeast districts. The Democratic caucus has also fought the very premise of the Voting Rights Act, claiming the map is racially gerrymandered. Under Section 2, you can draw districts using race. But the caucus essentially argued there's no problem to solve. Everything is fine, just the way it is. And that's what they're saying now. The Democratic caucus then shifted to something extremely appalling, saying that the Crescent map doesn't actually have 5 Black majority districts. They used the metric that doesn't include mixed race or Black Latinos. They used a metric, well, according to a story on NPR this week, that is the position taken by the state of Louisiana, which is trying to dilute the Black vote by restricting who qualifies as Black. The caucus owes this community an apology.
Thank you, Rachel.
Now, remember what the caucus did not say when they came out to the community and said, you're being lied to. There's not really 5 Black majority districts. What they did not say is, let's make the map better so we can actually have 5 Black majority districts or 6 districts. No, of course not, because they don't believe in it. They don't want Black majority districts. Then the administration secretly hired experts, one of whom helped Michigan reduce Black representation. And suddenly the Democrats supported Black districts. Effective Black districts is what they called them. And today we saw what effective Black districts look like. After months and months of refusing to produce a map, Democrats dropped a map 5 hours before this meeting. That is not good government, that's not respecting legislators, and it's certainly not respecting the numerous supporters of the Crescent map. That map is a Black vote dilution incumbent protection scheme. It also has some of the very same flaws that their own experts identified in the Crescent map. And the accompanying letter from County Executive Bello said this map should be a starting point for negotiations. Now, we've had months-long discussions for almost a year, and repeatedly people were invited to the table to discuss this proposal. The door has always been open, and I truly hope we can have those discussions now. More on that in just a moment. Now, you have numerous members of the public telling us that they like the Crescent map, and what the opponents fail to realize is that they're embracing what the map represents. How dare any of us look at Black voters and say, you're wrong, you're being lied to, you're misinformed? How dare we give them a map that is warmed over status quo? This has been extremely painful to watch and experience, and it doesn't have to be that way. What should have happened and can still happen is that all of us, all 29 of us, and the county executive embrace the enthusiasm over the map, embrace excitement over voting rights, sit down and work this out. 5 districts or 6 districts, we have a wonderful opportunity to create actual Black districts that could be a wonderful legacy for Monroe County. Instead, there's apparently a rush to court in which I'm not sure either one of these proposals will stand up. There's condescension to Black voters. There's a refusal to work out a plan, as is our job, and it is our job. I never agreed to forfeit my responsibility as a legislator to do this work, and I never agreed to turn my back on the 15 people who sit across the aisle from me. They were elected. To not work with them despite our contentious history is not democratic, it's un-American. Now, we have not only turned our backs on each other in this process, we're turning our backs on Black and Black-led organizations that have asked us to work on this. The NAACP, the Urban League, Poor People's Coalition, SURGE, Spiritus Christi's Anti-Racism Coalition, Baber, AME, Rock Acts, Faith Leaders Roundtable, and the Black Agenda Group. This isn't about LD21, and it's not about me, it's about them. There has been great harm caused. Seen it again in this meeting tonight, but we can repair it together. I want to thank President Sabrina Lamar for her leadership on this issue. Thank you. And this whole process, this last painful couple months has been devastating. It's really driven home to me why President Lamar is not with our caucus and why she's not home with us, with the Democrats. But she is a Democrat. I am a Democrat. And it's bad government to outcast people because they're not in lockstep and they're fighting for their beliefs. The path to reconciliation, if we want it, I want it. I don't want to fight with you, Adam. I don't want to fight with all of you. The fight is not by fighting Black voters. It's not by fighting each other. It strikes me as a terrible strategy before an election to make a key Democratic voting bloc upset. Now, I'm aware the Crescent map is flawed. I've always been aware. In fact, the first day I talked about it, I said it's a political compromise map. It's not going to be the one that we finally enact. The county executive has made that very clear. And that's okay. But it does remain the best plan on the table so far. And my vote tonight is for the map's promise and for what it means to the Black community. We can do Crescent 2.0. I've already encouraged this repeatedly in both public and private conversations. Now we need to set aside partisan hatred and fear and center the voices that we heard tonight begging us to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to explain their vote? Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd just like to say I consider myself very privileged to have participated in the process. It's been going on now for close to a year and a half. And, you know, it's been exciting. I did actually think that we would come to a legitimate compromise about a month and a half ago when myself and some of my colleagues on this side of the aisle and on the other side of the aisle, we got together and we actually thought we had a compromise map, produced. Unfortunately, that didn't stand up very long, but I know that my fellow Democrats on this side of the aisle and my fellow Republicans on this side of the aisle, I'd just like to say a little bit about my Republicans and where we come from on this, okay? So, and to also our audience back there, I've heard a number of comments that, you know, it's a strange bedfellows when the Republicans are supporting 5 black districts and the Democrats are not. Well, I'll tell you one thing. There isn't one Republican on this side of the aisle that does not firmly believe that there should be 5 black districts. We are not blindly following anybody. What we are doing, we are following our conscience, okay, and casting our vote for what we feel is fair. Nothing more and nothing less. I'm a farm boy from out in Churchville. Most of us here are from the suburbs, right? I've learned a lot here in my 7 years as a legislature. I served with Damon Wilson back here on the Race Commission 2 years ago. I had my eyes opened up to the struggles of the Race Commission that have pointed out specifically in the housing group. Damon, are you still back there? So I don't want to be, and myself and others on my side of the aisle, I don't want to be accused of just going along because we're just entirely ignorant of the issues that are faced in the communities of color in our city. I certainly am. My legislators am, and I am about to proudly cast my vote in favor of the map that's in front of us now. Thank you.
Anyone else like to explain their vote?
Yes.
Go ahead, Legislator Blakely.
Thank you, Madam President. With your permission, may I have a seat so I can speak into the microphone clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd just like a few moments to explain my vote. In this honorable body, we declare our conflicts of interest on any referral which might result in personal gain. And yet, for this referral, where conflicts of interest are so apparent and the stakes are so high, not one legislator raised their hand. I'm comfortable with personal and partisan conflicts in most of the decisions we make. Actually, I think it's important. In this matter, however, I cannot condone a nakedly political redistricting strategy, and we'll be voting no. To be clear, my no vote does not reflect my opinion of this map or any other map. Indeed, my opinion and the opinions of the 28 other legislators in this body should be rendered irrelevant. We simply cannot be trusted to participate in this process. Further, when malicious motivation can be ascribed to any position, that the debate devolves into personal attacks and speculation. Indeed, that's exactly where we find ourselves, personal attacks and rampant speculation. For 10 months, I have made it clear to my colleagues in the Democratic caucus and my constituents that have asked me that I would not participate in a primarily political process, nor would I vote for any map derived from it. And it was clear from the outset that this would be a primarily political process. We didn't look any further than one single criterion to demonstrate how this failed our constituents. Every map that has been produced to date accommodates the incumbents' residencies so as not to draw sitting legislators together. That lone arbitrary requirement irreparably restricts our ability to draw fair lines. Other political motivations are harder to and are more insidious and difficult to prove, but I think most people understand that political actors are motivated to work towards their own best electoral interests. And that in this instance, you cannot separate those motivations. They are too easy to hide behind a specific legal opinion or a particular interpretation of electoral analysis. Motives are too easily cloaked in the choices we make on the numbers we use and how we apply the laws. My desire to change this process has been met with little to no enthusiasm. However, it is my hope that if we look far enough out, Our personal and political motivations can be set aside. We do have an opportunity to work on this. Excuse me, in the coming weeks, I will introduce a referral that codifies a redistricting process for 2031 and beyond. There are dozens of ways to do this well, and my referral will largely remove the legislature's role and influence on map drawing. If any of my colleagues wish to participate in the drafting of that referral, consider this my invitation. Decade after decade, we return to the same divisive debates driven by this outdated framework. Unless we change how we do things, purposeful disenfranchisement of voters will continue to be the inevitable result. I urge my colleagues to set aside personal and partisan aims, join me in interrupting the cycle, and work toward a fair and more just future. Thank you, Madam President. I yield back.
Thank you. Legislator Hugh Smith, is there anyone else who wanted to explain their vote? Go ahead, Legislator.
I would like to make.
No, Legislator Udelson.
Thank you, Madam President. Well known that people of good intentions can disagree on how to reach a common goal. In this case, the goal to give voice to all people, especially people of color, as it relates to voting for their county legislators. I've been trying to keep that forefront in my mind while listening to the opinions, the conflicting opinions of so many community members about this process. Obviously, people are reading the data, the law differently, and it might ultimately be up to the courts to make the final interpretation. Democratic caucus has tried to support the concept of 6 districts that provide a likelihood of electing Black and brown representatives. 50% is not some magic threshold that will ensure those results. The voters of these districts under discussion have already proved that. Now, I'm not an expert on redistricting. It's important to note that although I recognize their passion, neither are the elected officials who are most vocal about the process. Statements are not factual just because they are expressed with conviction and force. Facts matter. As you know, I was with you in the room where negotiations were taking place. I can tell you at the beginning of the talks, we stated more than once that our goal was to take a map back to the caucus for their consideration, and that at the end of the session, when it became clear there were problems with what was on the table, Minority Leader Roman reiterated that there was no agreement at that point. Expertise matters. When the county executive wisely attempts to, quote, cool down the rhetoric surrounding this process by bringing in consultants with expertise and experience, you can't just reject their findings because you don't agree with their desire or because they don't align with your desired outcomes. The experts have told us that this map unconstitutionally packs more Black voters into districts that have a history of electing candidates favored by Black voters. This dilutes Black voting power and hurts Black residents. Common Cause New York said the proposed map, quote, reduces the number of county legislative districts. Minority voters have an equal opportunity to elect a representative of their choosing, close quote. In hindsight, I hope that the members of this honorable body who voted down the independent redistricting commission proposed by County Executive Bello are reflecting on this situation, the result of that vote. Disappointed that no matter what the disagreement, that one of the members of this body would accuse some members, including 2 Black members and 2 Latina members, of racist actions. That goes beyond the pale. In the end, I'm most disappointed in what I imagine most of our constituents are so sorely disappointed in. That is the same old, politicians who argue the loudest under the mantle of lofty ideals, but whose self-interests coincidentally fit their argument. Or arguing for 5 districts that can elect Black representatives when the Democratic caucus is advocating for 6, or arguing to have their district remain relatively unchanged, or removing the opponent from their last primary. We can do better, we have to do better, and therefore I will be voting against this referral on this map. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Madam President.
Go ahead, Legislator Baines.
I spoke to the commission that you put together, Madam President. You guys came out to my hometown of East Rochester, and I shared with you that, you know, I'm one of 12, and when we went for a trip in our family car, only 4 people got a window seat. 2 kids had to sit on the bench between mom and dad. The 2 oldest kids got the corners, and 2 kids had to sit on a bench, no seat belts. It was terrible. It was the late 50s and 60s. and 4 kids had to crawl in the back on top of the luggage and just lie there until we got where we were going. And I shared with you that I believe that if your group came up with a proposal that you could agree on, your bipartisan group, I would support it. I feel like the most important vote that I make is whether I decide to run again. If I don't think the district that gets created in which I live is a district that I can represent well, I'm not going to run again. Somebody else should represent that district. So I agree with Legislator Blankley. From the beginning, I've never wanted this to be a partisan process, but at the very least, it should be bipartisan. And so here I am tonight hearing from our community, and I'm listening very carefully to them. But what I did, because I live out in East Rochester and Parrington, I decided to listen to the elected officials who represent the city of Rochester, who are my colleagues. And I listened to Ricky Frazier. I listened to William Burgess. And I listened to Mercedes Vasquez Simmons and Yaversha Roman and Carolyn Delvecchio Hoffman, and to you, Madam President, and to Legislator Barnhart, Legislator Blankley, and Legislator Hughes Smith, and Legislator Hasman, all who represent the city, almost all of whom were overwhelmingly elected by the people of the community. So I was agnostic on this issue. I could live with the map in terms of where I live. And by the way, it does draw me into a district. I'm one of the only legislators drawn into a district with my old friend, Sean Delahanty. And we were together at Fairport High. Maybe we'll have an election against each other. I don't know. It's okay. It'll hopefully be a friendly election if we have one. So I really want to leave it with the community, and that, I listen to the people and I listen to everybody, but the people who are close to the people, I have to defer to them. And weighing that and listening to all of those legislators who represent the city, the vast majority of whom don't believe this map is a good map. So it's a rare thing for me to let other people tell me what to think. But in this case, I've listened, and that's the decision why I'll be voting no tonight on this map. Thank you, Madam President.
Legislator Baines, is there anyone else who would like to explain their vote? Go ahead, Legislator Delvecchio.
I would like to make remarks before the vote, but is it?
We're moving on to roll call, so if you want to make a statement about your vote, then I suggest you go ahead and do that.
Glad that everyone is paying attention to the county legislature. It's good to have the input that we've had. I agree with what many of my colleagues have said, that we should never have been doing this. Democrats supported an independent redistricting commission twice, and it was blocked both times by our esteemed colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I understand that some of this, it might be annoying to get an opinion from me, well-respected leaders in the room, but as I am the one who's going to be held accountable for my vote, I appreciate the chance to speak. In the country, it is illegal to draw districts based on race. However, what started to happen was that folks were taking advantage of people of color and drawing districts across Black and Brown and other marginalized groups. And so we have the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act stipulates that it is illegal to suppress Black, Brown, or other language minorities. When this was first challenged, the Jingles test was created in a Supreme Court. It provided 3 tests for whether or not a district or an area could seek relief under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Prongs were, 1, that the district had to be, it had to be possible to draw a minority-controlled district. It had to be enough of Black folks, if it's Black folks in question, or Spanish-speaking folks, whatever we were looking at, there had to be enough of those for it to be possible. I believe that there are 6 districts that meet that rung of the Jingles test. Second rule of the Jingles test is that there has to be a pattern of racially polarized voting. I think it can be argued that there is racially polarized voting, at least some of the time, in the 6 districts. The third rung of the Jingles test is that that white people essentially would vote as a block to usually defeat the minority's preferred candidates. So in this case, are white people defeating the Black candidate of choice? According to Dr. Hanley's analysis, in the 6 districts, from highest to last, Legislative District 29, in the 2013, 2017, and 2021 mayoral primaries, and in the 2018 congressional primary, and in the 2020 county clerk race, Legislative District 29 elects the Black candidate of choice 100% of the time. Legislative District 28 elects the Black candidate of choice. Legislative District 27 elects the Black candidate of choice 100% of the time. Legislative District 25 elects the Black candidate of choice. Legislative District 22 elects the Black candidate of choice 100% of the time. And Legislative District 21 elects the Black candidate of choice 60%. It could be argued that none of these districts qualify for relief under Section 2, but I think that we should shoot to do the absolute best that we can if we have a chance to strengthen Black voting rights, which we do. If everyone's at the table ready to do that, we should do what the law says, and we should go above and beyond. We should get as much power for the Black vote in this county as possible. That's what everyone's here to do. I think that the district that qualifies most closely for relief under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is Legislative District 21. It is the district where Black folks are least likely to elect their candidate of choice in Monroe County elections. Unfortunately, Legislative District 21 is the only district in the proposed plan where the number of Black voters is reduced. Legislative District 21 also goes from around 40% white to around 60% white. We have opinions from experts that this might not stand up under court, and I could understand why. In Cooper versus Harris, liberal justices of the Supreme Court struck down a bit of a trick that was going on, where Republicans said that they cared so much about the Voting Rights Act and about the Black vote that they thought they should make the Black districts as heavily packed with Black people as they could. The result of this, unfortunately, was to reduce the Black influence in white districts. So one of the things that I have learned over this very long process is that you have to walk a line when drawing these maps, and I don't think that we should be doing it. But legally, you can, it's like a road, and there's 2 edges you could fall off of. If you pack Black folks into districts that are already represented, that are already electing their candidate of choice, or if you pack too many Black folks into a district, then you're reducing Black influence in other places. If you pack too little Black folks into a certain area, then you're diluting the Black vote overall. And so what happened in Cooper versus Harris is the liberal Supreme Court justice said, nice try, but we're not going to allow you to do that. In another case, in Alabama, it was established because of the desire to protect Black influence in as wide an area as possible, that you could not set a number, a specific percentage, which you should try to get to. Now, we should not use the law to try to disenfranchise Black voters. We should not use the law to try to squeeze as much as possible out of our community. We should use the law to get as much as we could. So I think that under the Jingles test and under the opportunities that we have, removing Black voters from LD 21, that is the closest to qualifying for relief under Jingles test, and putting them into LD 29, which is a district that 100% of the time has elected the Black candidate of choice, I think, like Cooper v. Harris, where folks who are obviously well-meaning and believe in what they're doing might accidentally be reducing Black influence in a place that actually qualifies for relief. I think that with the opinions that have come out yesterday and even some of the concessions of folks who've been supporting the map, I think the community is starting to see that there might be a better map available. I think that time will illuminate more of this process and sort of what happened here. I'd like to speak to some of the things that have been said.
Please summarize.
I'd like to speak to some of the things that have been said about my Black and brown colleagues. I sit here with Black and brown Democrats who were elected by voters in their district. They have been accused of doing what they're told, lots of being shills, of being traitors. I'd like to be clear that the Black and brown electeds that I work with do not do what they're told. They are doing what they think is right. In Legislative District 29, folks needed a candidate and someone stepped up reluctantly and was willing to do that, even though it took them away from their family. In Legislative District 28, we have a legislator who is one of the first to hold the county accountable. He often votes against the Democrats if he thinks that's what's right. He is not doing what he is told. In Legislative District 22, we have a legislator that doesn't do what anyone tells them to do. And I think the community has seen that, and that she does what she thinks is right for the people. And in Legislative District 26, I have a colleague that has shown more integrity in the past 9 months that I've been working with her than anyone that I have ever seen. We often disagree, but she does what she thinks is right. My colleagues are not tokens, they have their own voice. And so I think that moving forward, we're going to have a lot more people at the table to draw this map, to work on the map. When I ran for office,
Rise, legislator.
you got it. When I ran for office, it was in submission to accountability partners. As a white woman in racial justice spaces, while I do think that this map is wrong, and I think that it will disenfranchise Black voters, and I don't think that that's the intent, but I think that that's what will happen. I continue to be in accountability to the folks that I am submitted to in this work, and I will support the map out of respect for them, but I will not have my vote used against my colleagues in any way. I have gone on record here that I think that what this map will do is the opposite of what it's intended to do. Out of respect for those I'm accountable to, I will vote for this map as long as everyone agrees that we're going to come back to the table and we are going to draw a map that enfranchises Black voters in all 6 of the districts that qualify for relief under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to explain their vote? Go ahead, Legislator Mafucci.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Burns. A very complicated issue. I appreciate everything you had to say. I know everyone here will vote their conscience. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Mafucci. Legislator Hugh Smith.
Thank you. I very much agree with the bulk of the comments made by my Democratic colleagues. I have come to this with the best of intentions to uplift the Black vote. I still believe the right thing is to have 6 districts where Black voters are able to influence the outcome of the election. I still believe it's the wrong thing to increase the number of white majority districts. And I just would like to pause and reflect on the fact that a lot of the community doesn't even know who their county legislators are. And I'd like to just uplift the names of the African Americans who have served in this body: Ronald Good, David Gant, Ronnie Thomas, Glenn Gamble, Vincent Felder, William Smith, Anthony Reed, William Lightfoot, Calvin Lee, John Lightfoot, H. Todd Bullard, Willie Lightfoot, Lachey Harris, Sabrina Lamar, Ricky Frazier, Michael Patterson, Ernest Flagler Mitchell, and William Burgess.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
I want to note the first thing I tried to do with Attorney Burns, and I want to echo my fellow legislators' thank yous to Mr. Burns for being here tonight and answering a very was to establish that there is no such thing as a perfect map. People will find things that they don't like about it, and there'll be legitimate concerns for the individuals. But they will latch on to something that supports their opinion, be it a law, be it a court decision, whatever. And they will then stand on those things as if they're the only thing that matters, and in redistricting, that's far from the truth. I want to remind or tell people who may not be aware, in 2010, this same body had the same set of arguments essentially that we had tonight. The map was being gerrymandered. It wasn't fair. I mean, just all of the same sorts of things, some slight different twists on it. But that there was a study done by CGR and the Monroe County League of Women Voters that wasn't released until over a year after the map was passed that found that it was not gerrymandering. In fact, it was geography that drove a lot of the changes that were going on at that point in time. I share some of the reservations of Legislator Long, and I agree with Legislator Udelson that facts always matter. And the fact is, we've almost run out the clock on this thing. Let's just quickly look at the time frame so that people in the audience can understand and make sure that all of us understand. Assuming this legislature passes this map tonight, the county executive will then have until November 20th to take action. He can take action as soon as tomorrow. He can wait till November 20th. If he waits to November 20th and then those actions are signed, veto, or take no action, which effectively lets the map go into effect. If he vetoes the map, then the legislature should take action to try to override the veto, and whether or not there are votes there to do that, I have no flipping idea whatsoever. But that would put us and that override can only be held at a regular scheduled meeting of the legislature, which puts us to, I believe, December 11th. Keep in mind, these maps have to be in place to support those people who are running again by mid-January to the Board of Elections so that they can create petitions, because the state legislature has said those have to be done in February. And courts have found that we need to provide them to that body, the Board of Elections, weeks in advance. So we've almost run out the clock on this. And I believe going to a special master or having court cases go on this takes this into, going into further negotiations just continues to push that clock back. And I believe that if we put this in the hands of a special master, or if we put this in the hands of a judge, we don't know what the outcome will be. Nobody knows what the outcome will be. Some are hoping that it will be better for them, and it may be. It may not be as well. And because of that, I will be voting for this map. I appreciate Majority Leader Brew's comments earlier. They were spot on. But this is an opportunity for us to take one step to provide justice to people, our constituents, who have been ignored for far too long. Thank you, ma'am.
Will explain their vote. Seeing no further discussion, I would like to take a moment. Legislator who? Oh, I'm sorry, Legislator Frazier, I did not see you. Go ahead.
So I'm not going to be long, but I want to give my thoughts. I'm going to be voting no, but this is my what I want to say. So at the end of the day, and I was at Lau Avenue function. My neighborhood is challenged, as most neighborhoods are in the city of Rochester. Certainly, President Sabrina Lamar, we share in common because we live in the city. And certainly in my area is no different from your area. We have food deserts, we have violence, we have not quality education, and lack of jobs. So for me, at the end of the day, it may not go the way I want as far as at the last minute when it is finally said and done, but I still have work to do because I love my community and will continue to fight for my community. Certainly as a Black man, I know what it is to be Black. I know it about the voter registration. My mother was from Mississippi. She grew up in segregation. My father, as many Blacks, they left the South to get away from segregation. So certainly I'm a poster child of that venue. And my thing is that I hope that as a whole, all 29 legislators, that we work together in the future to help our community, to help Monroe County, to get more Blacks to vote, because at the end of the day, I want to see Black legislators in the suburbs for the county. I don't want it to be just in the city because there's 29 seats. I want to see at one day a Black president of the Monroe County Legislature. So with that being said, yes, it was hurtful to hear some things to me. I mean, personally, to be called a bastard is not something, because my mother didn't raise me to be a bastard. And that really hurt me as a person, as a Black man. And so with that, I will sit down.
Legislator Frazier. Does anyone else want to explain their vote? Okay, I would like to take a moment to explain my vote. This is by far the most important redistricting in the last 30 years for Monroe County. We have an opportunity to right the wrongs that have plagued Monroe County every single decade that redistricting returns. For decades, even as Black people in the city of Rochester have grown to be a solid plurality of the city's population, the county legislative districts in the city do not reflect the city's demographics. This was true in the districts drawn 10 years ago and has only gotten worse through the demographic changes of the last 10 years. When one considers the fact that Black people in the city of Rochester have been historically gentrified into the Crescent area of the city, current city legislative districts are even more out of touch with demographics, the reality, and the law. The Crescent is a very densely populated area, an area identified in countless reports, including the recent Race Commission report, for its historic discrimination, redlining, disinvestment, and disenfranchisement. The neglect in the Crescent is a major reason why the 25th Congressional District, which includes the city of Rochester, is notoriously known to be the second worst place to live for Black people in this nation. Previous redistricting processes have failed to produce a map that truly maximizes the voting rights of Black city residents as guaranteed to them in the Voting Rights Act. This is not the time to turn our backs and regress. Which brings us to this year, where I was proud to serve as the chairwoman of the Legislative District Revision Commission that recommended the Crescent map before us today. Because of the demographic changes, historical disenfranchisement, and lack of consideration of the totality of circumstances in the Crescent, I knew that it was our responsibility to account for these changes and provide our community with a redistricting plan that addressed these issues and provided Black voters the representation that they deserve. To do so, adjustments had to be made to bring districts into compliance with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. After weeks of meetings, we finally reached a historic breakthrough on a bipartisan map that accounted for over 2 years of recommendations, addressed community concerns, and a map that could stand the test of 10 years' time. It was disheartening to see some officials pull their support and begin smearing the notion of 5 Black majority districts while refusing to bring forward any changes or suggestions. Thankfully, our community is smart and these smears have failed. The map before us today is truly bipartisan, truly a bipartisan map that ensures equity in party, people, and representation while adhering to all state and federal laws, most importantly, the Voting Rights Act. The Crescent map has been reviewed by the Board of Elections, their elections attorney, Joe Burns, and Arkbridge Consulting and Training, who have all expressed their confidence in the legal compliance of this map. We have heard from countless community members in support of this map, Black, white, Latino, urban, and suburban. This map has overwhelmingly support, and I ask you to listen to the voices in support and to your constituents. We have received countless letters of support from local community organizations demanding we provide the community with the Crescent map, including our local Rochester NAACP, the Urban League of Rochester, the Black Agenda Group, the Faith Leaders Roundtable, Baber AME Church Social Action Committee, Showing Up for Justice Rochester, Delta Sigma Theta, Rock Acts, the Poor People's Campaign, Reverend Myra Brown of Spiritus Christi, city members of Rochester City Council, including Kim Smith, Mike Patterson, Lachey Harris, Mary Lupien, and Stanley Martin, Robin Wilt of the Town of Brighton Town Board, former Mayor Lovely Ann Warren, and many more. The only so-called experts who have criticized this map are not from Rochester. They're not from this area, and they have no understanding of this city, its people, or our neighborhoods. One of the experts played a role in the dissemination of Black elected officials in the state of Michigan, and the other was responsible for developing the New York State legislative and congressional maps that were ruled unconstitutional earlier this year. The communities whom the Crescent map most directly impacts are the same communities pleading for all of us to support it. That should mean something to every member of this body and our county executive. This is a civil rights issue. This is a civil rights issue that is happening in our own backyard. No amount of misinformation or shallow reviews by discredited out-of-town experts can confuse the Black community or Black voters. They have demanded the 5 Black majority district Crescent map, and they deserve it. When you look across America, the very same efforts that Democrat officials in this room have engaged in to smear the Crescent map and against Black voters are the same efforts being made by the alt-right Republicans in Alabama, the Democrats in Michigan, and elsewhere. The stark correlation between Democrats here in Monroe County Legislature and Democrats on the Los Angeles City Council who were called by President Biden to resign over racial redistricting comments is extremely disturbing. How can any of us participate in something like this here in Monroe County, the home of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass? I just can't understand, and this truly hurts me. I am appalled at what I've witnessed over the last few weeks, but thankfully, I am confident a majority of us will not allow it to succeed. Furthermore, I know that I'm not the only one who has witnessed this unfold. Community members, voters, and history will all be watching closely at the outcome of tonight's roll call vote and the decision made thereafter at the county executive's desk. I ask each of you in this room to seize this moment. Support Black voters. Free the Black vote. Be a part of this historic bipartisan plan. Black lives shouldn't just matter on your lawn signs and by your thoughts and your prayers. We need more action and less lip service because it's the right thing to do. Vote to support and sign this Crescent map. Someday in the future, all of us will be gone from these hollow chambers, from this outstanding county we all call home. However, if we can come together in this historic moment, I have no doubt that the Crescent map will be remembered long after we have departed for correcting historical wrongdoings, empowering the disenfranchised, and uniting together in a historic bipartisan moment to provide the best possible representation to every single member of this community. The battle for civil rights has never ended, not here in Monroe County. These are the battles that have been fought by our greatest leaders, like Minister Franklin Florence and the late Constance Mitchell and Assemblyman David Gant. Nothing will change until we step up and come forward to solidify the values that we have long stood for. The late John Lewis once said, "The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in democracy. A vote against this is a vote to take Black voting power away. This is a chance for everyone in this room to pay it forward. And that is why I will be voting yes." I would like to thank all of the strong vocal supporters for showing up and standing up in this fight. Mr. Clerk, there being no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew votes yes. Ms. Roman. Ms. Roman votes no. Mr. Alcoffer. Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart votes yes. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines votes no. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley votes no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes no. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Delahanty. Mr. Delahanty votes yes. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman votes yes. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier votes no. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman votes no. Mr. Hebert. Mr. Hebert votes yes. Ms. Hughes Smith. Ms. Hughes Smith votes no. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns votes yes. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller votes yes. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes no. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe votes yes. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne votes yes. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris votes yes. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor. Ms. Taylor votes yes. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio votes no. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson votes no. President Lamar.
Yes.
President Lamar votes yes. 17-12, motion to adopt passes.
There being no unfinished business, Legislator Brew.
Madam President.
This honorable body stands adjourned. Our next regularly scheduled legislative meeting is Tuesday, November 15th at 6 p.m.